The Game Boy Advance is my most favorite handheld of all time. Released in the United States during the summer of 2001, I was just the right age to appreciate having the graphical prowess of the Super Nintendo in a device that fit comfortably into my right side pocket. 18 years later, and I can still remember taking my coveted Game Boy to school and battling my friends in a multiplayer Mario Kart game in the cafeteria, or being on a field trip and solving puzzles in the back of the bus as we played Four Swords. Now today I'm going to show you what I consider to be the greatest mod of all time for the Game Boy Advance, the GBA Consolizer. Created by fellow champion and PhD student Woozle, the GBA Consolizer allows you to connect a Game Boy Advance to a television directly, supporting lagless 720p resolution. Now at the time of the release of this video, the GBA Consolizer is unreleased to the public, but is available for pre-order and purchase on GametechUS's website. Now if you want to learn how to install one of these bad boys into your GBA, strap on. It's going to get dangerous. So here we have the GBA Consolizer hardware, a full replacement case, and of course, a Game Boy Advance. Now take a close look at the Game Boy Advance that we're using. Notice that it's in horrible cosmetic condition, and even the back has been melted. But despite that, as you can see, it's in relatively perfect operational order. Now, if you're going to consolize a Game Boy, I highly encourage you to only use GBA hardware that's in terrible condition. A good candidate would be, a unit that has a cracked or broken screen. That would be ideal. Now, as I said, GameTech sent a full case. There are two different versions of the GBA Consolizer. One version with a standalone case, which is exactly what we're looking at. It's 3D printed. It's pretty nice. But the other version is simply a screen deletion 3D printed part that has an SNES port poking out the side of it. We won't be installing that one. We'll be doing the one with all the bells and whistles here. So let's begin by prepping our Game Boy hardware. Let's disassemble it and let's do all of the prep work. Let's get ready. Now, in order to disassemble this, you're going to need to remove 7 tri-wing screws. And right here in the battery compartment, there's one Phillips screw. Let's take it apart. Okay, we now have access to the main board. Let's take a closer look. Now, in order to remove this Game Boy from the housing, there are just 2 screws, one on each side, that we need to remove, and then we'll be able to decouple the LCD screen from the main board up here. So let's just go ahead and let's zip these screws out. Now, we just need to undo the ribbon cable here that holds the screen into the main board. So I'm just going to lift these 2 tabs up on each side. Just bring them forward like that. Pick up the main board, like so. And it just falls right out. Okay, the main board is free. Let's zoom out and let's start some prepping. Now, we've totally liberated our GBA PCB mainboard, and there are just a few little prep things that we need to do to ensure that we have much success. The first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to remove the speaker, just simply by removing these 2 conductors here, and I'm also going to be bypassing, or canceling out, I should say, the volume trim pot to mitigate any noise, crackling, or audio distortions. That's very simply done. Once we handle that, the third little bit here is we'll just go ahead and remove the battery terminals. These aren't needed anymore because this is going to go into a full case, and after we do that, we need to bypass the power switch so that it is effectively always in an on position. I'm going to do that a little differently. I'm actually just going to remove the switch altogether, and we're going to short 2 little pins here. Don't worry, we're going to get zoomed in nice and tight, and you're going to be able to see everything. Let's start with the audio. Let's go. Okay, now here are the 2 conductors that drive this speaker. This is very simple. We're just going to turn this around and hold it like that so you can see it. And I'm going to use my K-Series knife edge tip with my Kestra soldering station. I'm just going to come right in here, heat both evenly, and just simply, very gently, pull these conductors right out. We'll clean that up in a second. Now, we're going to be bridging these 3 pads here, these 3 pins of the trim pod. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take my small J-tip. I'm just going to come right in here with some solder. We're just going to flood it in, just like that. Keep flooding. Don't be shy. Just like that. That's all it takes. Now, to remove the battery terminals, I'm just going to use my big and thick and beefy K-series tip here. I'm going to prop the main board up on something so it's off of the ground. And I'm going to just float my tip right into this big, thick solder mass. I'm going to give that just a few seconds to go molten. And rather than using pliers like a real man, I'm just going to use my hands. It's going to drop right out of there. Now, as you can see, our switch is quite pitted and corroded. And the way I'm going to combat this is I'm just going to remove the entire switch with my hot air rework station, and we'll short these 2 pins right here to force it in an on position. Let's do it. Excellent, the switch is removed. Now let's just bridge our 2 pins. Now we flipped our main board over because we have to remove this oscillator. I'm going to use our hot air rework station. We're going to work this off the board. Let's do it. Now we need to position the breakout board, and according to the instructions on GametechUS's website, if you're going to install this in a full case, the breakout board installs directly on top of the CPU, just like that. So that's where we're going to mount this thing, and then we're going to begin all of our wiring. Let's go. Nice and tidy. Okay guys, we're halfway there. We've got the left side of the breakout board soldered up and ready to go. We also have our power delivery right here. Just be sure that these match up. BT plus to BT plus, and anode to anode, cathode to cathode. It's all nicely labeled once again on the breakout board, so we're in good shape. Let's tin up the right side here and let's get to it. And with a few more joints, we're all finished with the breakout board. Now this is the bulk of the soldering with this kit. I think there's just a couple of other small things that we need to do for installing this in a full-size case, but you know, that's the breakout board. It's tedious, it's not difficult, there's some fine, small precision work, but it's really not that bad. It's just a little time consuming and it is kind of tedious. So maybe in the future we can get Woozle to create a nice flex cable or QSB to sort of make this go a little faster and to streamline this, but otherwise, not a big deal. So let's go on and let's get this thing going. Now, there's just a step or two that we need to do in terms of prep work on the GBA Consolizer's main board. And because we'll be installing this in a full-sized case, we need to remove the power switch and replace it with a single pole, single throw 3-lug and install this 3-conductor ribbon cable. So let's remove this switch right now. Okay, switch is removed. Let's just strip our 3-conductor ribbon cable and solder it right on P1, P2, and P3. Great, now we have our power switch wired in appropriately. We have these big open vias up here, and this is for an SNES, controller connector. Now ideally, I think that GameTech should solder these before they ever leave. I don't know why the customer has to be burdened with soldering this in. It's just going to give the customer an opportunity to try to solder this and it be all wonky and warped. I think that they should do that, and I hope that they do. I don't think that you should have to solder this. Anyways, to keep this connector level and flush and plumb with the main board, what GameTech suggests is just plugging an SNES controller in there. We're going to flip this upside down like so, just like that. Okay, I think that's fairly straight, and I've made some nice tall fillets here just because there's going to be a lot of mechanical force on this cycling controllers in, so I just want to make that as rigid as I can. And now I guess we'll take some snips here and we'll just try to cut these somewhat flush. All set. Now we've got the SNES port installed, and we've also taken care of the power switch. I think that pretty much covers it for all the soldering. Now the only thing left to do now is assembly. So I want to start just with the main board. I want to lift these 2 locking tabs for the FFC cables very carefully, and I'm just going to go ahead and insert these. Now they're tab up, so the blue tab will always be facing towards you. I'm going to very carefully seat that in there, just like that. Lock the black tab down. We'll just do the same over here. Very carefully, don't force it, it'll go in when it's ready. That's what she said. Or he said. Fantastic. Let's move on. Now this can be a little confusing, at least it was for me, assembling the full case here. So what I like to start out with is I'll just take our kit, which we have right here, and I'll take our lower piece, and you know it's the lower piece because it has the power switch designation here, and you have these 2 notches here, which are for power, which is micro USB, and mini HDMI. So to start off, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take the power switch of our kit, I'm just going to insert it into the hole, just like that. I'm just going to take our lock washer and our nut, and I'm going to lock this down. And finger tight is more than sufficient, that's what she said. Okay, so we've got that taken care of. Now I'm going to flip this back over so the ports are facing down and they're also facing me. Now, what I like to do is I like to just pick up the kit just like this. It's very simple. You'll notice that the ports interface incorrectly if you put the kit in with the ports facing up. It gets tricky, so what you'll want to do is you'll want to turn this upside down like so, and make sure your ribbon cables are going through the kit and you don't have a ribbon cable that's poking out. Make sure the ribbon cables are feeding through the kit, just like so. We're going to come right in here, and you'll notice, just like that, and the ports match up to the designations in the case. Now we need to lock this down. So to do that, we have 1 boss, 2 boss, 3 screw bosses. I believe this one is floating here because it's intended for if you're going to install this kit into an actual Game Boy Advance shell. So what we need to do is we need to run some M2 screws through 1, 2, and 3 bosses. Now we've got our kit mounted beautifully into the case as well as the power switch. There's only one thing left remaining that we need to do before moving forward. Now keep in mind, I have secured all 3 nuts onto the board just so that it holds everything together so that I can work. But when it comes time to putting the top side of the case on, these 2 nuts right here must be removed. The only nut that will continue to stay in position is the nut that's closest to the SNES port. These 2 nuts down here will help clamp the top side of the case down to the bottom side. Let's keep going. I just want to show you guys this. My Game Boy Advance uses a 32-pin ribbon cable to interface the Game Boy Advance to an LCD screen. Well, the problem with this is that Woozle's kit, by default, is only set up to work with 40-pin Game Boy Advances. So in other words, there's no way that this big wide cable would ever fit into this connector. How do we deal with this? Well, fortunately, Woozle has created an adapter, and this is a prototype. This may change a little bit in the production run, but he's created a little conversion apparatus that will allow us to adapt a 40-pin interface to a 32-pin Game Boy Advanced interface. Very, very nice. So I'm just going to go ahead and whip this in really fast. Just like that. Lock the tab down, and then I have a 32-pin cable, which will do the same. Remember the blue tabs face up. All set. And what I think I'll do is I'll just sort of gently tuck this down like this, and you'll never know it's there. Now at this point, this is where we start connecting the Game Boy Advance Consolizer to the Game Boy Advance mainboard. And there's really only 2 connections we need to make. The connection that interfaces the LCD port of the Game Boy Advance to the kit, and our little slim ribbon cable over here, which maps power as well as all of our button combinations, I think including the clock too, to the Game Boy Advance hardware. So we're going to start with this little slim cable right here, and so I'm just going to take our Game Boy Advance mainboard here. I'm just going to flip this upside down, and you can clearly see we have a tab here once again. So I'm just going to come right in here. We're going to insert that slim little cable right into its hole. We're going to very carefully lock the black locking FFC tab down. That's all set and ready to go. Now we have our ribbon cable here to our breakout board installed, so let's just flip this over and let's take a look at what we have. Now I've taken the adapter board and I've just sort of folded these cables down so we take the width out of this out. So what I need to do is I need to connect this 32-pin FFC cable and interface it to our Game Boy Advance mainboard. Now here's something important to keep in mind. When you do this, this is the only connection that you're going to make with an FFC cable where the contacts are facing towards you. You will not see the blue tab facing up. That's not how this cable is installed. So let's just go ahead and let's just seat that in there. We have 2 locking tabs on each side that we just need to push in. Very carefully. Not too much pressure because I've seen these break time and time again. Fantastic. So we're almost out of the woods here. Now what we need to do is we need to bring our cavity in, which is our full body, and we just need to make sure this is aligned correctly. So we have a hole here and we have a hole here. This hole in the corner should line up with the stereo headphone jack, and the hole in the top should line up with our link port here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this at an angle I'm just going to feed the body of the Game Boy Advance through the shell, through the bottom. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure when I seat this in here, hold this up at an angle and make sure that your link port or your extension or expansion port is the first thing that feeds through. Because if you feed this through like this, you'll have no trouble getting this mainboard to fit into the cavity. So let's do that. We're paying mind to our cable here. I've got a nice bend here in the cable so that it'll fit flush, because this is where this FFC cable has to live. So we're just going to go ahead right in here. We're just going to drop it down just like that. Now we've preformed our ribbon cable here so that it fits perfectly. I'm going to now remove the Game Boy Advance mainboard. And as you can see here, I've actually backed off all three of the nuts. Well, I've got a screw missing here, but the nuts are off these M2 bolts. So what I'm going to do now is we need to lock this case in. I'm just going to take these nuts. I'm going to take these nuts. Just like that. I'm just going to drive them down into the case so that these two halves are locked. Now we're almost finished here. The only thing remaining is to feed 4 M2 bolts into a few places here to lock the Game Boy Advance mainboard actually into the cavity. So let's do that now. Now we're all bolted down, and what we need to do now is we need to take this little piece of 3D printed plastic. We need to install this right here, because this is going to act effectively as our cart throat. So this is not bolted in, it's sort of just held in by tension. So I'm going to move this in just like that, just like so. And it should just lock in, just like that. We're all set. Now we're looking pretty good here. There's only 2 steps left. We need to put the top plexiglass on, and we also need to put the bottom shell on. So I'm going to just flip this over so we're looking at the bottom here. I'm just going to fit, let's see, I think it goes on like this right here. Bottom shell just like that. I'm just going to hold this in place, and right here. Now we got our bottom on there, and we're looking at the plexiglass, and I'm just now beginning to take a look at this. And I don't know if I was just sent a rough pre-production sample or what, but the plexiglass, it doesn't look very good. See if I can get this to zoom in a little bit here. See if that works. Yeah, that's a little better. See, there's a lot of splintering here on the sides. And also if you look at this, I don't know if this is a scratch or, yeah, that's a big, deep scratch. It's going all the way down. So I don't know what's happening here, but the plexiglass that I received, it's not very good. Again, I think that this is just maybe just a pre-production sample. I would definitely follow up with GameTech on this, but yeah, the quality here is not super great. Having said that, hopefully this is just a pre-production sample. Let's go ahead and flip the film off. Oh wow. I'm just looking here at all of the little splintering. That is not good. That is not too good. But let's see, maybe if we see if it kind of goes away a bit if we sort of seat this down. Whoops. My little cart throat fell out. There we go. Okay, let's see what this looks like if we sort of seat this in there. Okay, well, it's a nice, super nice and tight fit. So that's good. Yeah, not too bad. It'd be kind of cool to put some LEDs in here. But at any rate, the only thing remaining is to drive 4 bolts through here and to nut it down. Nut it down. And put some feet on the bottom of this thing. Let's go for it. And when you do this, try to just do it barely hand tight, because you don't want to put any more stress on this plexi than you have to. Final step, guys. Let's cut out these 4 feet and let's apply them to the bottom. And at last, I can finally live a childhood dream. I can play my Game Boy, Game Boy Color, and Game Boy Advance games on the big screen with a real system, real hardware. Guys, this is amazing. This is absolutely my most favorite mod that I think I've ever done. It's my favorite mod. I think that's even available right now. It's just amazing. The sound is fantastic. The video quality is amazing. The Game Boy Advance is scaling beautifully. Game Boy Color games and DMG games as well scale beautifully. And the best part about all of this is that it's lagless. I think Woozle only has to buffer out maybe a few scan lines, but we're talking, you know, a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of a frame. Super, super, super impressive. The colors are wonderful. Everything is fantastic. It all works so great. I just can't believe this is happening. It's like I'm really, truly impressed by this. It's just wonderful. And I'm not going to go into the whole gamut of features and options, but there's a menu here, and you can do so many things to manipulate the video. For starters, you can change the palette so that it more or less replicates different screen types. The gamma, which is great because you can offset the washed out colors that Nintendo and other developers had to compensate for because they were using a non-backlit screen. The scaling options, we can zoom this in and out. It's so awesome. Smoothing, which no one cares about, at least I don't. I want my pixels. I want my pixels. But it's fantastic. And let's take a look at a Game Boy Color game. This is Wario Land 3, the Japanese version. And just look at the colors pop right off of the damn screen. I mean, it's phenomenal. It looks so good. I'm in heaven right now. I've got to be perfectly honest with you guys. This is just so incredible. I love it. And of course we can look at a DMG, old school black and white title, and I like how razor crisp this is, and I love the grayscale palette. Now of course we can get into the menu here and we can change and manipulate these palettes for original DMG Game Boy games, but I really like this look. It is so authentic. It's not pea soup green, but it looks amazing. Having said that, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope this encourages you to maybe do this mod yourself. I love it, and I think the price is just right. I think if I were to go back and do it again, I think I would like to use the Game Boy Advance case and just repurpose that. The shell is nice, but I feel like it needs some time to mature a little bit here, and I don't know. I feel like that case is going to evolve. But at any rate, I hope you enjoyed this video. Keep inspiring each other, keep being good to one another. I'll catch you later.